I think the best way to introduce you is that you began your career as an adventurer, surmounting the three poles, as you put it. You and a partner traveled solo or unassisted to the North Pole, and then you traveled solo to the South Pole, and then you climbed Everest. And you followed that, publishing a number of books. You were a lawyer for a period of time. You eventually started your own publishing house and acquired other Norwegian publishing houses. I wanted to ask you how being an adventurer either helped you or guided you in becoming an art collector. Are there similarities?
Yes, absolutely. I think everybody is born an explorer in the sense that when I look at my own kids, they want to climb before they could walk. They were always wondering what was beyond the door or what was hiding behind the horizon. So I think that's a natural state of being. But somehow that spirit is diluted quite a bit when you grow up. But I have kept it, and I believe in making life more difficult than necessary, especially if you're born in Norway and like I am. Life could be very easygoing, and that's also one reason to collect contemporary art, because it is very difficult to understand what you're doing. And what is great art and what is not great art. So yeah, it's definitely a matter of exploration to venture into the world of contemporary art.
And what was the first inspiration or impetus for you to buy art? Was it something you saw that you suddenly realized you had to have, or did you start with the idea that you wanted to become an art collector and then educated yourself?
No, I never decided on becoming an art collector. One day I was, but I bought my first piece 32 years ago, late at night at a party at the artist's house, and he was short on red wine. I had some red wine, so I bought a lito from him for 2 bottles. The lito was obviously about jealousy, that Edvard Munch inspired. And my girlfriend had just left me, so I kind of identified with the piece. I still have it, I still like it, but of course today my taste has developed since. And then I didn't have so much money for many years, but then, as I said, I went into publishing to create a business and to be able to buy a house for my family. And after I bought a house, I had more money, and I started buying art. And I spent all my money on buying art last 15 years.
I think later we're going to talk about the advantage of collecting with very little money, or one, because that's the theme of the book's title, but you have some interesting views on how that empowers or enables you to be a better collector. But I wanted to stick with the exploration theme, because in your book you cite a motto for climbing Everest, and you mention it as a model for how to buy art, especially challenging unfamiliar art, not the stuff that you already know and comforting. And that motto is, think ahead, travel light, and leave your fears behind. Can you talk about how that works in something like either an art fair or going to galleries, talking to collectors?
Yeah, I think it makes sense because quite often it's, at least for me, it's hard to understand really why I like a piece. I go into an art show and I don't even necessarily like what I see. I'm just kind of curious about it. And since I, like most of the art collectors, have to work hard to have money to buy art, I don't have as much time as professional people. So then somehow, I think as an art collector, you need to be ahead of your own taste, because you can't wait until all time at least. Sometimes I like something right away, but all the times you have to accept it's going to spend days or weeks or years before you start to understand great art. And then you have to kind of, as I said, just be ahead of your own taste. And quite often I'm asked, do you buy things you don't like? And of course I do. I mean, it's not about liking or not liking. It's something that catches my interest, and that's why I think this thing about thinking ahead, traveling light, and leave your fears behind is obviously a good rule of thumb as an explorer, but also as an art collector.
Yeah, and I would say that the thinking ahead seems like you have some broader idea of what you're trying to accomplish as a collector in your own personal journey, if we can use that term. And the travel light seems to apply to maybe not worrying about spending so much money, but looking for the things that you can afford and can afford to make mistakes, and then leave your fears behind is not always needing to understand what you're doing.
Yeah, I think, and it's, it's leaving your fears behind also in the sense that you have to accept that you do mistakes. But the old Arabic expression, the dogs are barking, but the caravan has to move on. So you do mistakes, and that's part of life.
Speaking of mistakes, one of the challenging parts of the art world is just dealing with how complex it is. That not everything is obviously known. It's not like walking into a store or buying a car and saying I'll take that model in that color. It's a very opaque world. And you mention in the book that there are no rules, there are only deals. And I was wondering if you could expand on that. How does that help people think as a new collector?
Yeah, I think it's definitely very few rules in the art world, which I like, but also as a collector, you have to choose. I think between who you're going to hang out with, who you're going to spend time with to get the best pieces, because after all, the only thing that matters is that you get great pieces at fair prices. And then you have to choose if you're going to kind of curators, critics, the artists, blah, 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 or the gallerists. And early on I got advice to kind of focus on the gallerists because they're kind of the gateway to the really good pieces. They're making the decisions. So, and I live a busy life, and I really don't need many more friends. Like, I'm not into the art world to get more friends. I think it's really nice, but that's not the reason. So then I have been focusing all the time on spending time with the gallerist. But I end up having also very good friends among the artists and other people. But to get the good pieces, you need to somehow influence the gallerist that you get the first choice, and so you and also get to good advices about what the gallerists think, etc., etc., and then you make a decision, preferably before other collectors.
But you do say in the book that it's been important to you to meet and spend time with other collectors, that especially long-standing collectors with large and deep collections have been a real source of information for you. One, I wanted to ask you to talk a little bit more about getting to know various collectors, whether there's a strategy or it's just, circumstance, how it comes about. But also, do you buy from other collectors? Do you do private deals, or do you focus on working through galleries?
I usually only buy from galleries, a few exceptions, but mostly only for galleries. I'm very loyal to the galleries, that loyal to me. I hardly buy at auctions. I hardly ever sells. And in terms of these collectors, I don't necessarily have to know these collectors, but to kind of see what they collect is, I think, very inspiring, because it's so many really good collectors. So that's, for me, to see that others are doing or have been doing a better job than myself is really good, because you should never be too self-confident, and it's always someone out there who's better than yourself. And to me, that's really enriching. Not in the sense that it's a competition. Of course, it's a competitive edge, but more like to see what's possible.
Well, let's talk about the competition, because there seems to be a healthy level of competition at all levels between the gallerists themselves, between collectors, among the artists. There's a competitive drive to art collecting. Where do you draw the boundary on that competition? Is there an invisible line where you know not to cross?
No, really not. It's to me, it's kind of a love affair, this art thing. And as I said, there are hardly any rules. And although I'm a lawyer, I don't appreciate rules in my daily life. So if I want something, I just go for it. And I can't really see any boundaries. So I was listening to people yesterday saying that, what they regret, or, the art pieces they remember are the pieces they didn't manage to buy, and blah, blah, blah. I have very few of those experiences. I usually just go for it and get what I want.
Because you're just willing to pay whatever it takes?
Yeah, but, in the primary market, the prices are usually fixed. So you can always bitch on a discount, but I usually don't discuss discount. I usually get a good discount, but it's much more important to get the best pieces. And it's important to remember that most galleries, they're not better off than myself. So it's neither are they artists. So I'm kind of careful about not being too pushy on these matters. I pay what they ask me to pay if I want to have a piece.
And you pay on time?
I pay on time. I not even pay, not pay on time. Quite often I pay more or less the same day as I get the invoice, which takes people by surprise. But of course, if I'm short on cash, I have to wait. But for galleries to get the money right away, that makes an impression.
So, in the book, you tell the story that you bought a Richard Prince nurse painting, and it eventually became so valuable, you sold it, and you were happy to have sold it because it provided you with more money to buy more art. And in another place in the book, you talk about, everyone likes to make a profit, though that's not the goal of art collecting, and the profits come in other ways. Do you mean because you can use the money again, or because there's a different sort of profit from knowing that you bought something and then you were able to sell it for so much more money?
With that nurse painting was a very special case for me, because it went up exactly 100 times in value. So I bought for 50,000, sold for 5 million. And so that made a kind of total change from my own kind of economic perspective. I spent all the money on, I took my kids on safari, and I spent the rest of the money on art. So it's, so I said, I don't like to sell, but in that circumstance, I mean, I like the piece, but I like the money much more. I never missed that work. I'm just really relieved I got rid of it at the right time. It gave me lots of freedom.
So you've never had any regrets about that? It wasn't. It was a necessary thing to do to be able to buy more art. It was time. Someone wanted to pay so much more for it.
And also,
you were happy to.
But for me, I have better pieces by Richard Prince, which I also bought at very fair prices. So. That nurse was, I think it's a fantastic piece, but I liked the other pieces I had by Richard Prince more.
You talk in the book about buying quality and how important it is to focus on buying quality works. But you don't really define quality, and maybe that's because it's different for every collector. But I did want to ask you, how would you guide someone else into determining what quality works are for them?
I think it's, the most common advice in the art world is to see as much as possible. to read and to listen to people. And I think that's a very good advice, obviously. But I read Eli Broad, an interview with him. Of course, one of the most accomplished collectors in the world. And he said that you need to spend time, don't rush, don't buy, blah, blah, blah. But I think, I think it's smarter to do as Eli Broad does, rather than follow his advice, and to start to buy. Because if you're going to get a feeling of quality, what you appreciate, etc., as a collector, you have to actually start buying. And so my advice for people is to, buy 3 pieces. So it's so many wannabe collectors that end up not buying art at all because they're thinking too much. So I think, to read, listen, talk, see art, and then start buying. And you buy those 3 pieces, you take them to your home or your office or wherever, you live with the art, you see what you appreciate, what you grow with, what you don't grow with, and then go from there.
Is it important to you to have other people's opinions on the works that you buy?
Yeah, but I think it's always important to to gain respect, etc. But the thing is, when a gallerist comes to my home, they walk around the house. It's not that big, and they stop in front of a piece they have sold you and say, "This is a really great work," and then they hardly see the other pieces. So it's yeah, but it's I don't think that much about it, but it's but I think it's really nice when people, I had a show in Oslo throughout the summer with art from my collection at the Astrofurny Museum, and that 50,000 people buy tickets to see the art I have been collected. I think it's a fantastic privilege. And it gives meaning, although I'm not collecting because I would like to help other people or blah, blah, blah. I think it's a fantastic consequence that others can appreciate it.
So I wanted to go back to this issue of collecting without a lot of money, or recognizing that having unlimited money can be a detriment to being a good or even a great collector. And in somewhat you faced this situation when you suddenly had $4,900,000 to spend on art, where you clearly didn't have that budget beforehand. What's different when you're approaching it without a lot of money, and what did you do when you had much more money to help, mitigate the effect of having sort of an unlimited checkbook?
I think in general life, it's unhealthy to have unlimited amount of money to spend. I mean, just to look around you, people in that situation, they always look very unhappy. But also as art collectors, in my book I write about this. A friend of mine, I was in Venice at, I'm a bit dyslexic, but it's Ponte della Dogana, this Pinot's place in Venice. And he had this Jeff Koons, etc., exhibited really beautifully. And my friend was standing next to Viktor Pinchuk, this Ukrainian guy who has made a business out of ripping off his own poor people. And he was standing there kind of pointing at different Jeff Koons and said, like, I have that one too, I have that one, just like a little kid in a candy store. And it kind of, it's very uncharming. But it's also, if you see those people's collections, although, they can have great pieces, it doesn't have a soul. At least I can't see the soul. But when you go to, other people who always have to choose 1 out of 2 or 5 pieces and really have to kind of maybe sometimes take on debt to buy the piece and suffer, not in a maybe proper sense of the word, but still suffer quite a bit, worry to be able to buy this art and love the art they buy. It's a totally different collection. And also you can see this kind of strange pieces, which are very, very much like in private collection. I can see that pieces that somehow does not fit in, but it's due because the collector or the collector couple, whatever, that's what they like. That's what they kind of appreciate. And collections that are kind of perfect, it's quite often boring.
One gallerist once described one of the most famous collectors active today as the problem with his collection is there are no mistakes.
Exactly.
When you have so much advice, so much money, you buy nothing but A plus works, you end up with a collection that doesn't have personality and doesn't have conviction that way. So when you suddenly found yourself in a different collecting situation, did you create rules? Did you just buy slightly more expensive works? I mean, how did you approach being, overnight a different sort of collector, at least potentially, with more money to spend?
I have been forced to buy more expensive works because art has simply become more expensive. I remember 15 years ago, or maybe 13 years, 14 years ago, I was going to Miami for the first time. And I looked at the price for airplane tickets, and by kind of finding a really cheap ticket from Oslo to Miami, I could afford another Raymond Pettibon. But of course, and it's not on the Pettibon, but all art somehow has become much more expensive on this level. Of course, 99% of all the art produced in the world is still very, very reasonable because it's not a market for it. But this fair, I will think the average price has increased dramatically. So it has become more expensive, but I still prefer to buy early when an artist kind of getting too costly. I usually stop buying. I leave it to others, and that's also because I think it's curiosity is very much a kind of a major force for me, and but I mean, no rules without exemptions. I bought a Wolfgang Tillmans this summer, so a silver. So I mean, that's an artist everybody knows about, great respected, very expensive, blah blah. So sometimes I do it.
And an artist you already own a fair amount of work of.
Yeah, so that's also with Tillmans. I kind of feel that I should have a silver. I think I have a great collection by him, but I thought I should have a silver, and somehow a big silver is nicer than a small silver. So to me, so it was expensive, but I think it was worth it.
And how do you discover new artists, especially now that we have different venues? It used to be you went to galleries and maybe found a new gallerist every once in a while who had new artists. Now we have art fairs, and then on top of the art fairs, we have the social media and images flying around. Do you still stick with relationships that you trust? Or are you trying to get out ahead of those relationships?
I definitely stick with the relationships I trust. As I said, I believe in loyalty, which has paid off big time for myself. But still, I talk to different people, new people, email, talk to, see art all the time. So, I mean, I'm not leaving it to the others. But I think, here just at this fair, I think it's just like an artist like, I don't know, the artist I don't collect, but like Carl Holmqvist, when you get into entrance B, on the left-hand side, you see this light piece, this mother piece. Yep. It's $25,000, and some galleries will tell you that's cheap, but of course that's not cheap. That's a lot of money, but still it's a fantastic piece. Carl Holmqvist has been around for years. You had a hard time getting a gallery in New York at all, as far as I know. And but everybody who was following kind of that part of the art scene knew Carl Holmqvist was a fantastic artist. So I think quite often it's not that difficult to find new talent. Carl Holmqvist is not that new talent, but he was just not an appreciated talent. So, and it's the same with another, I think he's Swedish, and Clara Leiden, another Swede. She was, well respected for several years, being at museums, etc., but the market didn't pick up. Same with Richard Prince. The whole, all curators loved Richard Prince, but somehow the collectors didn't. So I think it's like this, I'm just surprised that the market is as slow as it is with many artists. And then, of course, you have Oscar Marius and all these other guys who goes up like this. But the only disadvantage, of course, it will, it will not stand, keep up that level.
I'm going to take questions in a second, so if you want to ask a question, raise your hand. There's a microphone, or actually a couple of microphones that will go around. But before I do, I did want to ask you about, you mentioned this briefly in the book, and it's very much the big topic about selling art online. And now that people have these kinds of loose relationships where they may not spend a lot of time knowing each other in person, but they see each other either around fairs or on social media, and they're able to be in contact with each other. Do you see more of this moving into that, realm of social media, and then the often talked about online transactions for art, or do you feel like there is a line between the two worlds?
For me, it is. I still buy art just from JPEGs quite often, but from people I trust, galleries I trust, and then maybe I know a person in the city that can go to see the piece for me, etc. But I think for many others, online sales, the market is going to grow dramatically. Maybe I will jump on it too, but as I said, I buy from maybe 20 different galleries, whatever, and so it's not hard to hold track. But I see some of my friends nowadays, they buy online, they shop, they find, an artist like Josh Smith, which I very much appreciate. If you're good, you can buy a painting for $10,000, same size as costs $65,000. And, but I would think I'd rather pay top price and get a fantastic Josh. But maybe I'm wrong in terms of the quality, and others buy it for $10,000. And of course, with those windows opportunities, it's fantastic.
But does that greater access to work increase the amount of work that you buy? I mean, I presume you don't have a set budget of, I'll buy 10 works this year, but there must be some sort of point where you say, okay, maybe I bought enough for now, and yet you have more opportunities to see and be presented art, whether it's someone sending you a JPEG or learning about it at an art fair. Is that increasing the amount, or is it just require you to be more selective because you see so much more?
I try to be selective, but it's, I think to be an art collector, it's kind of an absurd undertaking. I can't explain to my mother in a rational way why I spend so much money on a warehouse. So it's kind of, it's a bit craziness. And that's also, I think, in this book, I think, if you're not obsessed, you'll never become a kind of an art collector. You can buy art, but to be an art collector, you need to be totally obsessed. I think you just have to go for it. It's a love story.
Well, with that obsession and love, do we have some questions? After all of that, no questions?
How many artworks do you actually, How many artworks do you actually possess?
I'm not sure, and also it's a matter about defining what, with editions, etc., big editions, but maybe it's 700-ish.
So most of your art is now in storage then?
Yeah, most are in storage then. But I kind of circulate in my home quite frequently. So more or less all the art I have been through my house. And like New Year's Eve a few years ago, I was alone. I was supposed to be up in the mountains. It was hurricanes, I had to get back to the city. So I took all the art, my kids were away, and I took all the art from my basement, under my bed, in my lockers, just filled up my sitting room with art, and was sitting there for 3 days, enjoying the art, being kind of slightly intoxicated every evening. And when my family returned on the airport, I just, packed it all away.
And doing that whole survey, there was not one thing you said, maybe I should sell that, I don't need that anymore?
I don't like to, I don't like to sell. I like to have. It's kind of my thing, and I think it's kind of American attitude. It's more maybe like trading, that kind of. But kind of we Norwegians, we've never been great traders. At least I have never been a great trader. But I like to make good deals. I have a commercial mind, but like get as much quality per dollar.
Yeah, there's a recent billionaire whose collection was sold, who clearly liked his money more than he liked the art. He liked art, but he always liked to get a good deal on it. And there are many other billionaires who seem to clearly like the art more than their money because they're happy to pay, whatever it takes to have these very large collections. But when you get to a collection of 700 works, and I presume that the rate you're buying and the age you are, you're pretty soon going to get to an institutional size. Do you sort of think through where this all goes, or you'll deal with that when it happens?
I don't think too much about it. As an entrepreneur, I think most entrepreneurs think they will live for a very long time. But obviously, it's too much for my kids. So it's either when you look at auction catalogs, you see what happens when you die. Your kid sells it all right away at pathetic prices because they don't even know how to sell and don't get good advice. That's that's very bad. So that's one alternative, and another alternative, of course, is to give it more or less all away. But maybe it's a third way. I don't know. I hope so.
Well, the third way that's become very popular now is to open your own private museum. I mean, there are several here in Miami. There are increasing numbers all around the world, certainly in Asia and all. Is that something you see wanting to do with your collection?
I don't think so. It's not me. I'd rather give it away to another museum. I think it's cool, like in Miami, when they do it. But it's not so much me, and I don't have the money either to I rather spend the money on art. So it's then I have to marry rich, which is not very likely.
And your kids, are they involved in the art? Do they see it as just part of the background noise of family life, or is it something that they're engaged in?
Today, they very much love the art. As you can see in the book too, they live with the art. But I remember when they were small and they were kind of fed up with this art all over the house. I told my oldest daughter, if you sell this painting, you can buy this store up on the 5 minutes walk away that sell all these sweets. And then she kind of understood the value of the piece, and she got some more respect.
But she didn't ask you to sell?
No, she probably wished, but she got some sweets anyway.
What's your opinion of art advisors? Do you have one? You mentioned the importance of gallerists, but not art advisors.
I think, art advisors are like anything else. Some are really good, some are not. For me, it's not important with an art advisor because I think, part of the thrill is to do it myself. But some art advisors, I think, they give good advice, the hardworking people. So they get lots of shit quite often, but, I respect good art advisors. But obviously also so many lousy art advisors and some kind of not so good art advisors. And so it's with them as everybody else. But I also talked to some galleries that prefer to deal with art advisors because they have more knowledge quite often than the buyers. And while the buyers, they have a kind of a surplus of cash and a deficit of cultural capital, the art advisor can help them. So, some of them are good, but I think, I think it's a bit, to me, it would be a bit boring. Then I'd rather do something else.
Do you have art advisors who approach you with deals? I mean, you're certainly a prominent collector, but...
Yeah, I can't remember. It certainly has happened, but I can't, because I'm not the right person.
Not enough to remember.
You had mentioned that you have a commercial mind, yet it's a bit of a love story. So I'm curious, how do you balance the practical decisions with the emotional attachment or movement through the art, since it's kind of a emotional experience yet value-driven moment?
Yeah, it changes all the time, but also as a publisher, one of the reasons I went into publishing was because I like this kind of combination between the commercial attitude and also in the understanding of the intellectual side. And if you look at publishers who are only thinking commercially, you know, eventually they go bust. And also publishers who also only think about the intellectual side, they also go bust. So somehow you need to have the combination. And sometimes I just buy something with my heart. And other times it's less heart and more kind of, you know, think about the deal. So I wish I could kind of give you a proper answer, but this is kind of changing all the time. But I think I kind of respect both sides, because sometimes you meet people who kind of have a dislike of the commercial part. But I also respect the commercial part, but also with not having, of course, I'm rich by most standards, but compared to many other art collectors, I'm not. So I have to think about money and the commercial side too. But I don't think too much about how it's going to appreciate in value, etc. Then I would just buy paintings, but I would think that was a bit boring.
So, sort of semi on that theme, you tell a story in the book about wanting to buy a Franz West series of six sculptures that replace the hood ornament of a Rolls Royce. And then when you bought the work, you discovered that the Rolls Royce was part of the work as its plinth, and you had to buy that as well. That's obviously a commercial. It's a more expensive thing to buy a Rolls Royce along with these works, though maybe the Rolls Royce was much cheaper than the series of works. But you also now have a Rolls Royce. What did you do with it? Is it still part of the work?
You know, I'm not into cars. I grew up without car. My parents didn't have a driving license, so we didn't have a TV. So, but I just saw this invitation card with show with Franz West in the Basel in Frankfurt. He was standing next to this Rolls Royce where the ornament was taken away. I had this passstücke, this very kind of phallus symbol, instead of this Emily in the front. And I thought, you know, I just have to buy that piece. So I got hold of Gresslin, and I was back and forth, and I think she wanted to sell it to a museum or something, but they were slow. So I pushed on, and then she said, it's not one sculpture, it's 6 sculptures, one for each working day. I said, okay, I'll buy all 6. And then I knew the prices of Franz West was going to go up because so many things were happening. So I felt I was in a kind of a rush. So I agreed on the price. I thought it was a bit expensive, but still I knew, you know, this is absolutely, you know, super important piece. And now as a tombstone for Franz West in Vienna, they had made a copy of the one in front of my Rolls Royce at his height. So but anyway, so we agreed on the price. I got the invoice. And of course, this sculptures, the car was a part of the art piece, but I thought I had to buy another Rolls Royce. But when I got the invoice, it said 6 sculptures so-and-so, and 1 Rolls Royce Silver Shadow 1970. So kind of sometimes you feel cheated by an art dealer, but this time I felt very fortunate.
But you still won't tell me what you did with the car. Is it in storage?
The car, no, the car I drive every summer. So I had them to make a kind of eventually a copy. But first couple of years I drove it with the original piece. But of course when people are drunk in Oslo, like any other place, they like to kind of fool with it. So I drive it all summer, and then I have it in a garage in the winter. And it's really kind of people start to laugh when you drive down the street to kind of point. So it kind of, I put a hat down like this so they don't recognize me, and then I drive and have a good time.
2 questions. And one you may have addressed already, and I would like to just comment, maybe some of others of you experience this also. but every time there's one of these salons or conversations, the access to this space is different. So it's very convoluted how you get here. So I would just like to comment to the group that puts on this event that often we are forced to miss the beginning. And I imagine in the beginning of the conversation, you maybe commented on how your interest in collecting was first sparked and what drove you to become the collector you are today. And then as part of that, I'm wondering, given the example you gave of pulling all the work out and looking at it and then putting it all back, it seems that the aesthetic of installation is not important to you. In other words, once you buy the work,
Well, we can
but
answer the question.
I
I'm
can
sorry,
answer.
we can answer the question.
I
that
can
the-
answer. The aesthetics is definitely important, but that's kind of in my home. I put a great effort in how I hang and present the work, and also rehang quite frequently. So this is a very time-consuming thing, but I still do it a lot. But then when I'm alone with it, like just kind of fill up the whole house, then it's kind of the singular pieces. But in hanging in general and taking care of the art, I'm very focused. And in terms of you said about how to start collect, I think curiosity has been a driving force the whole way, and to me it's a matter about exploration. And it's a fantastic privilege to be able to buy great art, and I actually think about it most every day that I'm a very fortunate person. I think more people should be aware that they are fortunate.
And I don't think it hurts to recapitulate the story you told at the beginning about how you didn't intend to buy art. You were with an artist, and you got into literally a transaction of a barter transaction that was your first art purchase. How did you go to the second one?
The second art piece I bought was from my cousin, who's an artist. And I'm probably the only collector of her art. She's my age. I think she's a fantastic artist, but she's one out of 99 out of 100 or 999 out of 1,000. It does not have a market, but she's still a fantastic artist. So I keep on buying her works, and I have a piece in my book and I exhibit in my home. So I bought a few pieces by her, and then I bought some older Norwegian artists until I understood that everything in Norway is extremely expensive. So then I went abroad, and somehow art in Norway, no, art in New York was more reasonable than art in Oslo.
Do we have any more questions? Do we have a microphone? There we go. We'll start there. We'll get to everyone.
My question is, what kind of budget should a poor collector plan on setting aside for collecting?
I put that title, A Poor Collector's Guide to Buying Great Art, also in kind of a humorous way. But I think I write that if you, for instance, have $5,000, I will recommend people to travel to an art fair to see as much art as possible, visit galleries, and subscribe to some good art magazines. And then I think also within those $5,000 you can buy some fantastic editions. I'm surprised by, for instance, Artist Space, but also many others. You can buy editions for $200 and $400 of good artists, great pieces. So I think that's definitely a good place to start. And I buy them even if I don't know why I buy them. I just like them. It's more expensive to frame them than to buy them. So so I think that's a good start. But in terms of budget, I don't know. I never had a budget myself, and if I had, I would definitely spend much more money than the budget allowed. So, but of course, to be a collector it's very costly. So yeah.
It sounds like it's actually especially on that level, it's as or more costly getting to and seeing and relating to the people than it is to actually buy the works. Coming to Miami is good. You're going to spend as much as you would on spending $5,000 for a work here. And if you're going to go to lots of art fairs and get yourself, if you don't live in a city with a lot of art galleries, you're going to probably spend more money in your first few years on learning than you are on the actual art.
Yeah, Miami is certainly extremely expensive. But I live in Norway, so I recommend people to go to Berlin, which costs a few $100 with a plane, stay at a hotel, and go to see all the shows. Most great artists are represented by Berlin Gallery. There's hardly any great collectors in Berlin. Of course, you have Boros and a few others are really good, but beyond that, very few. So it's not so much competition. So for me, I also buy in New York and London, but of course then it's so many other fatter cats than myself. While in Berlin, so it's Berlin. It's possible to not spend much money, but on other than art.
I'm meant to wrap it up, so this will be the last question.
Is it important to you to support the local scene at all?
No. I should probably say yes, but I'm only here for a few days. So if I was able to choose, I would, but I really haven't thought about it. Sorry. I wish I was more.
I'm sorry, which local are we referring to? Do you feel any obligation in Oslo to be a part of and support, even if it's just the collectors?
Definitely, but I thought just here in Miami. I mean, yeah. Sorry, yeah. I thought you meant if I've gone to galleries in Miami because I don't have time. But in Oslo, definitely, big time, and that's good for me too because I want the art community in Oslo to be blooming. And then you have to be responsible for supporting it. So that's a big part of it, and it pays off in many different ways. Absolutely. And we have Standard Gallery in Oslo, a few other galleries, and I try to support them and support artists there, and artists not represented them there, and blah blah blah, big time, and that's part of the fun.
And with that, I'm going to close with another commercial. You can buy this book outside, or Erling would be happy to sign them for you. And I hope you'll join me in thanking him for spending this time with us.